Well, Australia, I should say good morning, Australia. How are you?
Fabulous, thank you. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. Thanks for participating in our Leaders Who Care series. Appreciate you getting dressed up on a Saturday morning, over there and doing this. Great way to start would be if you could introduce yourself and just give a little brief on who you are.
Great. I'm Emilie Smith. I'm the CEO of EXO Works, and we're working with large companies around the world to help them innovate and move beyond thinking that doing things 10% better is enough to actually doing things 10 times better, just like the fastest growing companies in the world. And I love this topic because it's so much at the core of what we do. The fastest growing companies in the world all have massive transformative purposes, which describe why they exist in the first place. And if we take that into clients, the underlying part is, well, how do you want to improve the world for millions of people? And when you actually get to that point, everything else flows, and they care, but they make a huge amount of money out of caring.
I could actually just conclude with that. That was fantastic. It should be the introductory to every video I do. So we're all familiar with the infamous why, right? And which was around before Simon really made it a big deal, but it's important. So share with us what your why is, but I really want to know, why do you do what you do?
So I think that there are so many companies going through disruption at the moment, and even before COVID. I mean, now, unfortunately, the market has come to us for all the wrong reasons, but there are so many companies that are only iterating on their existing core products and services that might be obsolete within the next 10 years. And that could be just mass bankruptcies. And frankly, I never wanted to live through that world where we have that much disruption of all those companies collapsing. And now it's even more important that these companies have their processes to get stabilized and do the crisis management, but so many of them are thinking in terms of the old economy. I just talked to a large company that was doing scenario planning. We're also doing our internal scenario planning and thinking about how the world has changed. Their scenario planning is, well, if the interest rates change to this or these economic indicators change to that, what should be our future debt structure? And I'm going, well, that's the old economy. You could get completely blindsided if you're actually not thinking more broadly about the fundamental underpinnings of the world being changed.
Yeah, it's a great point, because the easy, comfortable way is to go with what you've done, especially if it's kind of even worked in the past. But it is like anything. It doesn't mean it's going to continue to work. And as somebody described it, this could be like biblical times if you want to think that way. And what you're talking about is if you get away from being cast in that stone, then the opportunity could be incredible.
Well, we see opportunity in two major ways. First of all, we've been tracking about 15 technologies that we thought would become ubiquitous in 3 to 5 years' time. Actually, 13 of those we think are hitting a tipping point because of COVID and will become pretty ubiquitous quickly. So there's, every 25 years, the global GDP doubles. It's currently $90 trillion, which means that it's probably those technologies that will create that next $90 trillion. How do we play in that? So that's one of the opportunities. But the second one is people are in distress. And so we're talking with our clients about how do we improve the lives of millions of people. And there are some really tangible things that our clients are doing at the moment, whether they're switching over to making masks, which a lot of companies are doing, or they're saying, okay, well, we're a large construction company in the Middle East and there's 1 million construction workers that were all already treated pretty badly, living out in the desert in conditions where people are often stealing the money that's meant to be for their food and their sanitation. How do we protect those workers during this time, especially as a lot of them are sort of being locked down in case there's a spread? And so we really can work with those leaders to make sure that they're doing things that are caring and good for their business and protecting themselves for when things really do pick up again later.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It always amazes me that it's taken, and we've kind of both lived through this. We talked about caring over the years, and it's taken decades for people to recognize that aligning with social impact is actually, hey, maybe that's a good idea. They found that it was a good idea to attract the type of talent we're talking about that want to go there. So that kind of woke them up. But also that it is, like you say, really good for business. And you've got an interesting background because you've been engaged in the entrepreneurial worlds, startups, private equity, growth, transformation, the whole bit, globally. And I'm kind of revealing a little bit of the answer of what I call a push question, which is, so with all that you've done, what makes you one of the leaders who care, from your experiences?
Well, I've always fundamentally cared, but everyone does. And so you've actually got to find a way that you're proving that you can, number one, have the audacity to do that. And I think a lot of leaders don't feel like they're allowed to go do it. But second, that it actually does make sense. And so when you see things actually working, that changes things. When I came into this company that I'm now running, they had just had a major win, which was that the largest Mexican insurance broker was a client, and there had been that huge, horrible earthquake in Mexico City at the end of 2017. They were just in the process of rolling out one of the initiatives that our company had helped them on. And they said, well, hey, we're not in home insurance, but 90% of homes here are not insured, and people are freaking out about aftershocks. In 72 hours, they rolled out a new product into the market that was home insurance, but they had already brought in this idea of the massive transformative purpose, and they decided to live up to it. And so they said, well, actually, let's offer all of these policies for free for 3 months with no obligation of signing up at the end. You can gift it to people, just let's get everyone insured. And of course, they had a huge sign-up rate at the end of that. But their competitors were not offering policies for 2 weeks while they, assessed the situation. And so that company has actually doubled revenue and tripled profits in the 3 years since we worked with them, and say that it was our processes that did that. But they absolutely proved that it can be very, very profitable to be doing good things for people. And so when you see examples like that, it's very easy to say there's a methodology here where we can actually do something and continue to create that kind of value for everyone.
Yeah, I love that story because, well, first of all, they have to have the guts to do it, because who knows what kind of risk they were taking of potential claims. But they actually had the guts to care. And I love what you said before. Some kind of leaders weren't allowed to care because you'd have quarterly financial results, which are on top of you all the time. And you have the shareholders. And so I've noticed that too, where leaders wish they could have had the time and to do it, and not the pressure of, I always got to make money, get up more. And so how do I care? Just donate $10,000 to that charity and we'll say we cared, right?
Right. Which is crazy. And it's also telling their own people that they're allowed to care. Right. So we actually have been talking a lot about trust in companies. Yep. Essentially, a lot of people have been told, this is your job, don't do anything else. If we're going to have big ideas, it's the C-suite, it's the strategy department, or it's an external management consultant that's allowed to come in and do that, because of course you're not capable of coming up with a great idea. When you actually take people from within the company through a very systematic process to show them how they can turn some of their great ideas into something that's very practical, they come up with incredible ideas. And when you start that whole process by saying, you are here to change positively the lives of millions of people, what problem do you want to solve? and how are we going to actually create a business around solving that, it completely changes the question, and it completely changes their lives. You know, the ability to actually have a large-scale company and a CEO from that company saying, we will back you to change the world, they rise to that situation every single time.
I can't agree with you more. I always give the story of the coach who tells the player, oh, you really messed it up, you're benched, you're not playing. Versus, so next time if he ever gets another chance, he's nervous as crazy, he can do anything. Or the coach says, you really messed up, this is what you did. Now go out there, we believe in you, and go do it. So your return on investment is spectacular. The loyalty is unbelievable. And because the person gets that feeling that is more powerful than other. And you know, it's leading to some other things I wanted to chat with you about, where I recently did an article on LinkedIn. I was referring to my grandparents, who was about caring and everything. And I said, like, Bobby, your grandparents, every grandparent said, you know, he said, as long as we have they were from Kiev, as long as we have our health, that's the most important thing. You know, and they meant it. It wasn't like a line. They actually meant it. So with all the technological changes that have gone on, that you've definitely seen a lot. And here we have COVID, you know, impacting us socially, economically, like crazy. We've kind of had an awakening, if you will, and time to actually think about stuff and everything. So with all that, and related to what you said about leaders maybe now have more time to care and do stuff, how do you view, you know, the future of work and business, like in the next 2 months, but also beyond that?
Okay, so in the next 2 months, I see a huge amount of automation happening and a lot of jobs disappearing, especially when we think about farms that don't have people to go and pick their crops. You know, a huge amount of robotics will come in. This is a time when a lot of the car manufacturers that are thinking about automated vehicles are actually going and testing those vehicles on roads. And so I see a huge destruction in the labour force over this short term. However, in the long term, I'm a huge optimist. Jobs are to deal with problems, to deal with inefficiencies, and we're not having less problems in the world. There will be plenty to go and solve. It will be just different kinds of solving. I mean, if you think about the internet, that automated a huge amount of jobs, and yet the inefficiencies around that, or the problems that needed to be solved, were, well, we need to have a website that's going to be good enough to attract people to it, and therefore there's a job. Gee, it's insecure, we need to have cybersecurity. That will continue massively. We just don't necessarily know what those jobs will be.
I totally agree. I remember a client years ago when websites, it's going to show some age here, websites were just coming. And I remember one client, especially big companies, super successful, we're doing great. I don't know what this internet website thing is. We don't really need that. And he was coming from what you were talking about, what he was used to before, and not thinking like, maybe I should at least even look at this thing just to see that this website thing made sense. So it's brilliant. Not to mention what you're talking about too, infrastructure that's going to be able to have tons of jobs. The thousands that they're recruiting finally here in the States, even for testing people,
right,
and doing things like that. So you're right on the money. And you know, it's I'd like to hear what you think with respect to that. What role you think business leaders who care, and we've talked about this a lot. I think a lot of what the future, it's not a big revelation. A lot of the future is going to come from business leaders leading the way, and how much they care about. What role do you think they'll play in caring about well-being? But I mean the financial well-being as well as the physical and mental well-being of their talent, which again goes back to them being able to attract the best people who see that they do care about that, and then how that flows down to benefiting their business, and as you've indicated to some degree, goes into the community.
Well, I think the first thing, coming back to what you said about quarterly focus,
Right.
That is really crazy. I would love to see companies refocus on saying, here's our massive transformative purpose. How much time do we need to actually get there? Because that's when you deliver real value.
Yeah.
And actually, when you create that massive transformative purpose, everything else flows from it. You never need to say to your staff again, we need some social impact or we need to care, because it's literally baked in. Every decision that you make can be, gee, are we going to actually reach that MTP? And that MTP is there to help millions of people. So if we could actually change that conversation, it would change the world, literally. But I think that we've seen this huge shock go on in the world. And we're also seeing leaders find new people who they might not have imagined through their organization, who have turned out to be much better leaders than some people that they expected. And those people need to actually be given the permission to go and change things. You know, we just watched with some of our clients, some of the more junior people that we had worked with, coming up with fantastic ideas to really help during this time. And those CEOs saying, yes, I'm willing to actually let you go run with it, which is a great thing so long as there's actually the structure behind it. But it's also having the guts. You talked about guts. You know, we worked with a CEO who at the beginning of the process said, I want to do something really huge. I want to, change the world for people. And we were at the leadership, annual leadership event of his, and he said, I'm a new CEO. I know that a lot of you here are coasting towards retirement, and this is not your kind of thing. And the quid pro quo for me not having a problem with that is that you don't get in the way of this. This is my thing. Stay the hell away. I'm going to do this. What leadership? What guts? What audacity?
Sounds a little bit like Paul Pullman with Unilever and stuff, but it's the best thing that happens that I've seen, and it doesn't necessarily happen as much as it should, related to your point, is when you put the young person together with what we're now calling the vintage person, we'll go with vintage, and put them together, and they both are excited. The vintage person is excited about learning new things and getting the energy back, and the younger person is excited about learning new things from the wisdom and bringing the energy and getting a chance to, like you say, do something great. It almost seems too basic to have happened, because it's an omni-win, if you will, and but it doesn't always happen. So if a leader can do that, I saw that happen also with workplace environments where they started eliminating offices, and you didn't have an office, and people who are more senior, what do I do with my pictures? What do I do with all this? Well, I'm used to coming to the one place. I go there. This is my routine. I go here, I sit down, I go get coffee, whatever, the whole thing. So it's great. For bottom line, I guess what we're both saying is change is good.
And reverse mentoring is really good. We've seen so much of that. We worked with someone who was an entry-level telesales person in one of the companies. And he really kind of struggled through the beginning of the process, and then sort of came alive. And eventually he and his team came up with an idea of a $3 trillion untapped market. Now, obviously, it will not be that entire 3 trillion that they go after, but it was actually pretty incredible. And I now see that very young person very regularly on LinkedIn saying, oh, here I am with the CRO testing out this technology or that technology. And it's really cool to see. But when we do talk to leaders about how to do this, we say, it's not necessarily that you should be involving them in the decision making, but you need to be getting them to ask questions, because they ask completely different questions to the ones that you would. And they sometimes see those processes that you wouldn't have imagined were obsolete. I mean, when we worked with Procter & Gamble, we were asked to help with their invoicing process, which was meant to be the really boring part, right? But it turned into a big win, which was, fairly quickly, the senior people were coming up with ways to improve the invoicing 50%. And the young person kept saying, but this doesn't make sense to me, but just explain to me why are you doing it this way? And eventually said, is this a legacy thing that you're just doing because it was always there? Like, do you actually need these invoices? And the eventual answer was no. And they got rid of an enormously expensive invoicing system as a result.
The moral of that story is kids take over, little kids take over, because the minute, why is the sky blue? Da, 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 da. But why? Da, 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 da. But why?
My brother was convinced that the sun plugged into the sky like a light bulb. It was gorgeous. But I think that we're seeing lots of kids come into video calls these days with work from home, and hopefully they can ask some good questions too.
Well, there is a lot of good to people to bring up questions. Sometimes people bring up questions just to bring up questions. But if someone brings up a question because they sincerely don't know why it works that way, then the best thing any leader could do, and this is to say, maybe we should look at that. And it might not work. 10 times it might not work, but one time.
That's right.
Something
Yeah.
happens. And Dyson, he would hire his people in the UK, engineers, to fail and fail and fail and fail.
And eventually it works. Yeah. I love to see the different questions that are sort of asked, but you actually have to give people space in order to do that. And Dyson has been great at doing it. You see Apple and other teams, where they actually have stealth teams that are just continually questioning why things are done like that in a particular industry, and it works.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back in time, you wonder why somebody didn't ask it earlier for whatever scenario. So I got one last question. We got a lot of young people graduating without graduating ceremonies. There's some going online and stuff like that. So piece of advice that you would give them as to what's next? What do I do?
What's next would be to find a really good mentor who will actually let you ask those questions, and someone who actually does want more out of you than boxing you into a small job. Someone who actually says, I want to change the world.
Great advice. And it's totally consistent to what you're saying about basically go with your passion too, and learn.
Right. And instead of inventing shiny object kind of products and then pushing them out to the market and using a great marketing campaign to tell people what they should be wanting, think about a problem in the world. Think about something that really annoys you and that is friction in your life. If it's friction for you, it's friction for huge numbers of people. Go and solve that. And then you'll find that you have that caring and that profit just baked in together.
Yeah, I interviewed another executive who said, life's short. Find that passion and change something, make something happen. You're going to make money anyway, and life's too short not to enjoy what you're doing and even create a legacy.
Have fun.
Yeah, and have fun. God forbid, have fun too. So, well, thank you for sharing the X's and O's of what we're doing here, and you show us what it looks like to be one of the leaders who care. So,
thank you.
Yeah, keep making a difference, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks, Mark.